The life of Christ is fascinating not only for what Jesus says and for what he does, but also for how he does them. We see this in today's gospel. Jesus could have, if he wanted, appeared in the boat alongside the apostles, just as he appeared in the upper room after his resurrection. He could have, if he wanted, come down from the sky with a great light like Superman might do, if he wanted. But what he did instead was he walked on the turbulent sea in the dark through the storm to reach the apostles. And they had been braving the storm for almost 12 hours. And so we can imagine that their nerves were rather frayed at this point. And they look out and they see Jesus walking towards them, and they cry out in terror, not knowing what or who it is. And it is at that point that he speaks to them, that reassuring voice, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." So what's interesting about this is that they take and derive courage and trust from this very place out across the water that they had just a moment ago that had been the source of their fear. The source of their fear became the source of their trust. And normally, when we are in dire situations or problems, we look for a solution from outside, not from the very center of it. But God's ways are not our ways, and Jesus wanted to enter right into their fear and destroy it from the inside out, to increase in them trust, to increase in them their love for him, and to express his lordship of their lives and of all creation, so that later on, perhaps when things were difficult, Peter and all the other apostles might remember that night that Jesus walked towards them on the sea and he calmed their fears so that they could continue. So this is a consistent pattern that God can bring good out of evil, that he can bring trust out of fear. We hear it in our first reading as well. The prophet Elijah is a wanted man. The king and queen want his life, and so he flees from them. We can imagine how terrifying such a situation would be. But what happens in the middle of that? He has this encounter with God. God speaks to him in a tiny whispering voice, and he is strengthened to go back and to face the challenges that await him. The solution comes inside of the problem. And I've seen this in my own life as well. Some of you have heard this story. But one time, a couple years back, I was on a retreat praying about when did I first think about being a priest? When was that seed planted in my life? And I all of a sudden remembered the time when I was 10 years old, and my parents came and told us that we were going to have an additional member to our family. So we had 2 boys and 2 girls, and we were going to have a little brother. We were all very excited. Well, some months later, they came back from a doctor's appointment and said that our little brother had a birth defect and that he wasn't going to live long after his birth. And so the day came for him to be born, and he lived only a couple hours. But the priest from our parish, a very saintly priest, was there to baptize him and confirm him and usher his soul into eternity. And so I realized later, all these years later, reflected upon this great sadness and time of sorrow in my family's life, and realized that in the midst of the darkness of that time, there was a great light, and that was the priesthood of Jesus Christ. That this priest, in that dark time, showed us the love of God and the love of Jesus. And that's what placed the seed of the priesthood into my heart. And so this is how God works consistently. The patterns are always the same. And we see this above all in the Paschal mystery of Christ, in his passion, death, resurrection, and ascension. If we look at the cross of Christ, this was the greatest evil ever to be accomplished, the putting to death of the eternal Son of God. And what came out of it was the greatest possible good, our salvation. The cross of Christ in the new creation has become the source of life, and streams of grace flow out from it across the whole world. God can bring good from evil. He can bring healing from pain. He can bring trust from fear. New life can emanate from the place of death. This is our Christian faith, and this is the basis of our hope. And this is why we live differently than those who have no hope, because we know this to be true, because God in his goodness can bring good out of any situation. And so we trust in him and submit our lives to him and have great hope and great faith, because this is the pattern that he has shown us again and again, and he renews once again in our lives as well.